I'm delighted to see your faces. I recognize almost all of your names. Many of you I've known for a while, and we've messaged in Slack or in other platforms. So I'm just delighted to get to see you in person, and perhaps that's one of the lessons I've taken away from these last few months, is to really appreciate the time that we get to connect together. So I really am honored that you took the time to be here live. That means a lot to me personally, and it makes this process a whole lot more fun for me, and hopefully fun for you too. We've blocked the hour. I think all the material that I've prepared for today will certainly fit within the hour, but I would invite you to ask questions if you'd like to chat, or just kind of chime in. I'll try to pause and ask for questions frequently. Certainly I'm not bothered at all by being interrupted. Don't view it as an interruption. I think the conversation is far more valuable when it flows as a two-way street, not just a one-way street. And we've got plenty of time. I did email some exercises and transcripts that we'll talk about a little bit later. I went ahead and sent those to you about 10 minutes before the hour. You won't need those for a bit, and we will provide a recording and the slides and anything else that might be helpful via email and in the plan that you can access through the app or the website. So no need to furiously take notes, except on things that feel powerful to you. I think that's what I would encourage taking notes about. So what we're kicking off today is our updated habit coaching training program. This one is intended to last 8 weeks. It's a bit of a beta. Tony and I have been working on updating this process, so we appreciate you guys jumping in and hopefully giving us feedback on what you enjoy, what feels helpful. And at week 5 or 6, hopefully you'll really be seeing some differences in your coaching practices, and can give us feedback on how well that's working. All right, so let me pause. Is there any other sort of structural or timetable, big picture conversations or questions that would be helpful to know here up front?
Yeah, I would like to ask if this course of 8 weeks will entail something related to marketing and client acquisition, or if it will be mainly on the art of coaching, or a combination of both.
This 8 weeks is more on the craft, though I will integrate some marketing things where I think they fit. We're working on a longer training program that would absolutely have more of that, but we wanted to get the craft part right. So I would say 80-20, 80% craft, perhaps 20% marketing, and we can certainly, I know Sherry leads some other aspects of that. So I think we can find ways to support creatively this cohort in that space too.
Okay.
So great question. Thank you.
But there will be some best practice as to how to set up properly the account and the profile and things.
Yes, next week is actually on the profile. So next week we'll focus completely on the profile.
Okay.
So I think you'll be happy with both. And certainly if you have more questions in the open office hours, we can talk about those as well.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, let's jump in. Again, if you've got questions throughout, you can chat, or I'll pause and ask for questions and jump in. The big idea that I'd like to share with you today is what we call the habit coaching paradox. And I like to think of it as somewhat of a beginner's mindset. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to press pause on your previous experience and practice, particularly if you've been coaching or consulting or leading for a while. We will eventually marry the two, but for a moment, if you can put your experiences, your practice, just in the parking lot, I would say, temporarily, as we go through, in particular, today's concepts I think it'll be helpful, and that may be more challenging the more experience that you have. So that's why we call this the paradox. This particular aspect seems to be more challenging the more experienced you are, but that's okay. It eventually the two marry really well. So it's just a pause. We're not asking you to forget everything that you've ever learned. Just set it aside for just a minute, and embrace humility and patience. And we all throw those words around a lot. Uh, but again, think of it in the learning aspect, that the the more we're willing to open our minds to new ideas, that's a form of humility, and the patience that it might take a few weeks before we see a significant impact. So for those of you that have coaching businesses and are ready to see that trajectory change, it's probably going to be about week 5, assuming that you're following along each week and really doing the exercises before you feel the shift in that trajectory. So it's not going to be, an immediate snap your fingers like a light switch kind of a change. It's going to be more like a dimmer switch kind of a change, where we make changes over time, and we change that trajectory of your practice. So I've got a lot of chats coming in. This is awesome. Let me take a look at these. Okay, great. So everybody says they love being a beginner. So this works great. Awesome. I knew this was a good group. And every time I click my screen, it advances the slide. Sorry about that. So glad to have so many new folks. So another concept I want to introduce you to, and then we'll pause for some conversations and questions, is blisters. So how many of you had a chance, or did anyone have a chance to watch the John Wooden video or read the article about John Wooden that I sent out yesterday afternoon? Or anyone familiar with that story? It's a bit of an American icon, and I know we've got so many folks all around the world, but his story is really relevant. The principles are relevant all around. So did anybody get a chance to read that and have an idea of what we're talking about when we say blisters?
Yeah, I think I remember it from a book. I haven't read this article that you shared, but basically he starts by the little details and train his athletes so that they take care of how they put their socks and how they lace their shoes, because if it's not properly done, it can cause blister can cause injuries can cause match, and match cause whole season. And so starting with the very little details can have like a very big impact if you don't take care about it properly.
Excellent. Well, you nailed it. For not having seen it yesterday, you've got a great memory. So exactly as Arnaud said, we want to focus on the foundation, the little things. And so John Wooden was a legendary basketball coach, college basketball coach, university basketball coach in the United States, and led his teams to many championships. And even in the years where they were coming back after winning a championship, he would start those first few hours with his team with talking about their socks and shoes and how to properly put on socks. And if you watch the video, he talks about preventing blisters. And if you think about it, blisters can be a great analogy in coaching. And they are, minor irritations that we get between coaches and clients that don't go off track right away. It's not a blow up, but it is a minor rub, a minor irritation where the client isn't feeling completely supported and complete expectations. It doesn't necessarily mean the coach did anything wrong, but we want to be aware of where these common blisters are, because in a lot of cases, just like putting our socks on, correctly, there are some things that we can do as coaches to help prevent blisters. And so that's a concept I wanted to introduce to you, and something we'll be talking more about. They are quite predictable in some cases, particularly as we see how clients tend to present themselves, and in a lot of ways they're preventable. Certainly not completely, just like in basketball. Sometimes people get injured no matter all the prevention that they've done, but you can certainly reduce that by being aware of the opportunity of the blister. And so if you get a chance, watch that John Wooden video. It's very short, or read the article. I believe I found one that's outside the content wall of the New York Times, and it just gives a blurb in their own words about his approach to that. And so some of the things that can cause blisters with clients are their own frustrations, right? They may come to coaching already quite frustrated in their attempt to make a change in their lives. And so they may be coming to us frustrated. They may be confused. This may be the first time they've tried out coaching in this manner. This may be the first time they've ever really thought of coaching at all. Or certainly if maybe they're familiar with sports coaching or that kind of thing, this may be the first time they've considered coaching in a different context. And they may have a specific expectation that they're bringing with them to coaching, or they may develop expectations in those initial few interactions with us. So when we get to the transcripts this week, we'll get to use some examples of what blisters might be, but be thinking of that word. Does anybody have any questions or concepts they'd like to share related to that?
Yes, I'm not clear on what it means for a frustration that the client is coming in with, for that to be a blister that we could somehow anticipate and prepare for.
Okay, that's a great question. So the question is about how would we even know, or how might we detect a frustration that a client's coming in with. One of the things we'll talk about a little bit today and later on are surveys, onboarding surveys that we often use with clients, and some of the questions that we ask can help encourage clients to share with us or reveal if that's occurring. So let's say one of the things that I typically coach on is setting priorities for your day. And so if somebody reveals to me that they've tried to set priorities for their day, multiple times, but they can never follow through, right? That they're kind of giving me a clue that they might already be a little bit frustrated at this process, and I'm going to need to keep that in mind as I get them going and try to get them initial momentum. I've never coached health-related goals, but in reviewing transcripts, lots of folks have often tried multiple different ways in the health arena to get healthier, and so they may be coming to coaching with perhaps not a ton of confidence in themselves and their own ability to navigate their health goals. Does that help? Great question. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the key principles. And certainly we will learn lots of things over these 8 weeks. But there are 4 things that are constant. I would even make yourself a mental checklist, SCIC, to run through when you're interacting with clients, to sort of flip through, does any one of these apply? Or is the conversation with the client veering away from one of these? I use it as a little mental checklist as a compass to help bring me back if I'm seeing a client relationship start to veer off track. So we'll talk about each one of those. So let's start with starting small. And I'm going to stop share so that we're not all just tiny boxes. And we can see a few more faces there. Awesome. So starting small. I'm gonna go over a little bit and then we'll talk about it, because I think, and I was debating for a moment whether to talk about it first, because I think this is one area that perhaps lots of folks could share with. But clients often come to us with really big dreams and goals, and that's awesome. We want to support that, and we want to steer that. As coaches, we want to translate those big thoughts into something, a small action that they can take. You've heard previous training on this. We called it the momentum method. In the training that you're going to see come out in the future from Tony and Coach.me, I believe we're going to use the word keystone habit for that initial habit that we encourage clients to start with. It often needs to be tiny. This is a concept that was coined by BJ Fogg. You'll see his work referenced in much of Coach.me's reference material. Certainly someone that Tony and I had both independently studied and had actually had some podcast episodes where we talked about. And when I started coaching flossing, just to give you an example, we would start with just one tooth. So the initial habit, if folks were learning to floss, we would start with committing to floss just one tooth each day. So it can be, it can feel a little bit underwhelming to start clients in this way, but it is absolutely a key principle in habit coaching, to focus on that initial momentum and to focus on helping a client identify that keystone habit that can be a daily action that they commit to. I want to pause there and see if anybody wants to chime in with their experience with this. If you've been coaching, Sherry, awesome.
Yeah, expect resistance to that, because people come in with really big goals and they want to conquer the world, and you say, like, floss one tooth or spend 3 minutes doing this, and they're like, no, that's too small. And my attitude is, you have to trust me on this. I've coached hundreds of people and it works. So just like you said at the beginning, just suspend your previous ideas about it for a moment and just go with this. Just try it and see what happens. And because the biggest thing that happens, the people who try to bully you into not letting them do that and say, no, but I can definitely do like 4 hours, there's no problem doing this, and they're the ones that fall off the wagon straight away. A week later they're gone. So you have to be quite you really have to quite stand up for this principle at the beginning.
Thank you for sharing that. And week 4, we'll talk about it every week, but in particular week 4, we're going to talk about how to do this. But you're absolutely right. There's again, we talked about that confusion or that unmet expectation. Sometimes clients, they've signed up for coaching, but they very much want to tell you how to coach them, and so we have to navigate that. Anybody else have experience or have familiar with that feeling?
Yeah, I'd just like to chime in with what I think BJ Fogg would say about that resistance, is that the way to overcome it is to emphasize it's not about how much are you doing, it's about how much are you willing to celebrate. So if you give yourself permission to celebrate flossing one tooth, it's okay if you go on and floss all the other teeth, you're probably gonna. But if you stop after one tooth and just give yourself a high five or a fist pump or something, that's the secret sauce.
Awesome, great point. Anybody have not feeling lots of reservations about this principle, or want to talk through it any further? It is one of the biggies. of habit coaching. Definitely, we call it one of the big four, and perhaps the one that meets the most resistance. Okay, awesome. Well, we can come back to it. It's certainly reflected in the transcripts that we'll get to. So we said SCIC. The first C is consistency. So where we give on going from big to small, we make it up in stacking lots and lots of those small daily actions. So we are firm in our consistency, and just by showing up and interacting with that client daily. In a lot of cases, it really does need to be daily. For most habits, that can really be an essential piece of that relationship, and it's what translates the big. It's what makes the small add up to the big eventually, is that daily repetition. So any commentary or anything to add on that one?
Well, I guess how long to stay on the first tiny steps before stacking the second one would be my question.
So the third principle we're going to get to is called iteration.
Okay.
But that's a great question. That's exactly your point. And it can depend for each client. But the first one is just that commitment to be there in what can sometimes feel awkward. So has anybody felt awkward checking in on a client, every single day on whether they were flossing their one tooth? Has anybody ever thought, is this really helpful? What, somebody's really going to wants me to show up and ask them if they flossed their one tooth? I see a few nods. Okay, so a handful of folks have felt that way, and the answer is unequivocally yes. It is an overwhelming support to clients for us to be there, and many of them will eventually express it, even those that were initially reluctant to try this approach, so to speak, will eventually realize their own success. Not always attribute it to the coach, which is great. As long as they're doing great and feeling great about it, I think it works just fine for us coaches to be in the background. But many times clients will be like, whoa, I've actually flossed my teeth 5 days in a row. I've never done that before in my life. Okay, so we are feeling a little bit of awkwardness with that checking in. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, can you tell me what habit you tend to work with the most?
I don't have a specific habit yet that I mean, I'm new to this, so I'm not in the habit category just yet, but I mean, in some way I am, I guess. But it feels like when I check in, and when I've been checked in on, it feels like even if I know it isn't meant that way, and even if I don't mean it that way when I check in on my clients, it still feels a bit like someone is sort of silently judging, are you doing what you said you would do? Or I'm not sure how to express it, but I think you know what I mean. This kind of like the teacher checking in on you, are you doing your job, right? That's the vibe I get, even if I'm the one asking, or if I'm the one being asked. I feel like there's this judgment is too strong a word, but like
That's a great point. So there's two things I would say. Great point, and we do want to be mindful in how we check in. The other thing I would add is coaches make horrible clients, because we're analyzing. They talk about doctors make the worst patients, and so I don't think we're unique in that. What is it? The cobbler's kids have no shoes. I think every profession kind of has its corollary to that. But I wouldn't always project what you feel when you receive that to what the client feels necessarily. Now, absolutely, we want to be mindful, and we may even want to say, how does it feel when I check in with you each day? Is there something I could do different on my check-in that would be more supportive? So I love your heart in thinking about how that's going to be received by the client. So does anybody have maybe a specific example that they've kind of worked with, a particular habit that they've worked with, that maybe you found a way to ask that question that was helpful?
Hi. So I usually tend to work with people who have anxiety issues or just coming for me to kind of have better overall mental well-being. And the whole daily check-in thing kind of acts up on their anxiety. So I just found the best way to overcome it is just from the get-go. I usually send them a list of like 3 questions. Okay, what is it that you're struggling with the most? Is it, usually we have a conversation before they even go and coach me and know, what are you struggling with? Why are you coming to me? And they tell me, I want to focus more on being more emotionally resilient. I want to focus more on lowering my anxiety or what have you. And then the second question is, okay, how often do you want to check in with me? So I just put it as one of my top 3 questions from the get-go. How often do you feel comfortable in checking in with you? And usually we work on some kind of a mechanism for them to remember. So either I will check in on them every day to remind them, or we're going to agree that they're going to set a reminder on their phone. What I found to be surprisingly useful is I actually create custom backgrounds for them that have the habit that they want to focus on in a very nice typography. So whenever they kind of unlock their phone, they always have like a reminder that's there.
That's a great idea. And the part about aligning expectations with clients, we'll get to that one in a later week. That's certainly important. But you're getting some comments there. Love that idea. The custom phone background is a great one, and the reminders. So Coach.me does have reminders in the app that we can use. Awesome examples of adding those supports. So in our 4 values, SCIC, the third one is iteration, and this is what Arnaud touched on earlier, of creating that cycle of progress, where yes, we start small, but we don't necessarily stay there forever. As they succeed in building that initial daily habit, we'll recommend a slightly larger scope, or if you think of it brick by brick, if a habit is a brick, you kind of stack bricks, or whatever metaphor it works for you and for your clients, but embracing that cycle. Often a weekly cadence can work for an engaged client that is engaged every day or nearly every day. A weekly rhythm of getting a little bit larger scope or a little bit different every week can be helpful. You'll want to adjust that as you see the client building momentum or slowing momentum, because sometimes they will want to be over ambitious even in round 2. So you'll want to help guide them in a way that they can be successful, but embracing that iteration that comes, the ability to iterate that comes from staying small. Anybody have an example there? We can stick to the flossing, right? So if you started with 1 tooth, you might go to 2, or you might go to something a little bit different, but you might not go immediately from 1 tooth to every single tooth, if we're thinking about it in those terms. And I coached it may sound ridiculous, it's not nearly as hot of a habit, but I coached for literally 1.5 years on flossing, and probably over 100 clients. So there are folks that will that want to do all sorts of things. There really is nothing that's too small, and I was knew enough to not know how silly that sounded, but there really isn't too. I don't think you can be too humble in what you think about what folks would love to get in the rhythm of doing. It's oftentimes things that we overlook as being really simple or really basic, that form those great foundations. Yes.
I just wanted to add another example. One of the things I coach is time blocking through my work, not through Coach Me. And I find that when people hear certain techniques, especially the Pomodoro technique, for example, they tend to want to get really excited and jump into, I'm going to time block my whole day or my whole week. And so it's often an act of reeling them back to try one Pomodoro. That's it. Not even the 4 cycle version, just one time block, because it's surprisingly challenging and it's very easy to get discouraged if you go bigger than that. And I usually meet with resistance there, but I ask them to do that and then just be very reflective about how it feels, what came up during the process, and take it from there. So that's another example.
Awesome. Yes. Great example. And I think a perfect of that starting really small, like you say. Most people would even think the first would be the block of them, you know, the pack together. And you're saying, oh, no. We're going to start with literally just one turn of the timer. So excellent. Yes.
I used to work with families a lot, and believe it or not, a lot of family issues would come from like, oh, they just, it was very intense because the work that I used to do was intensive in-home psychiatric treatment, right? So you get to these houses and you think that, you know, everybody's chaos and this and that, and a lot of it was just parents literally complaining because the kids don't clean their room, they don't wash their clothes, they don't do this, they don't do that. So one of the things that I used to tell them was like, you can't, like, this kid does not, like, they just come in the house, they throw everything, they're not going to, from today to next week, have everything, you know, sparkling clean. So we just started with like making the bed. Just make your bed. The rest of the room, whatever, but just like make your bed. And then from then on, we would give them like 2 weeks, because there were little kids, 7, 8-year-olds. So it's not like a teenager, you can, you know, focus more on them and be a little bit more on them. But like little kids, 2 weeks, and then, okay, so now we're gonna work on making the bed and putting your clothes in the laundry basket and so on. And I used to tell them all the time, this is something my mom used to say, with math, like it's steps, right? In math, you can't learn how to divide if you don't know how to multiply, or if you don't know how to add and subtract, right? So this is the same thing. You can't go here if you haven't done the first few steps. And it was very interesting to see kids do that. So I enjoyed it so much. Like, you make your bed.
And I think that's a great example, you know, if clean your room is the first block, then the brick of that is make your bed. I love it. And somebody else says, has chimed in on the Karate Kid, you know, hang your jacket every single time. Those Karate Kid movies are awesome for this.
That's true.
Miyagi is brilliant for sure. In what is it, wax on, wax off? Yes, those most basic elements. And so I would challenge you. You guys are hitting on some awesome things. If the first few steps of the client aren't so easy that you almost feel silly recommending them, you're probably not making it small enough. There's a lot of truth there. And the sooner we embrace that, and believe that, and experiment with it, and see the effectiveness in our clients, we really have to embrace that and believe it ourselves. So I would encourage you, if there's something you want to learn, just something different, you know, I'll say flossing. You know, if you're not flossing your whole teeth every single day, play with that one and watch how it feels to learn it. But pick a goal that you could absolutely be a beginner in, to experience that as well. And if you've done the digital coaching as a client, and you got to set coaching completely aside, which is really hard to do, really hard to do, especially when you want to be a coach. But getting it from the true client experience of a completely unrelated goal, sometimes it does click as a coach, and you're like, oh, I get it now. So if you don't ever, you should feel often silly or ridiculous or tiny in recommending those first steps to clients. It really is a humbling. We really have to kind of get over that our own ego, particularly if you're a successful coach or successful in anything related to coaching. So my background is a CPA. When I first started coaching in 2011 or 2012, it wasn't necessarily something that I thought I knew anything about. So perhaps my journey was a little bit easier in that I started with a completely blank. I was just a habit nerd who started, teaching people how to floss. So I had the benefit of not having, not having experiences in leading people through transformation that could happen in different types of coaching. But we're specifically talking about habit coaching, which does lead absolutely to those transformations. The journey just looks a little bit different. So embrace, yes or no?
Yeah, just since you mentioned flossing a few times, and I just want to understand, did you use flossing as an example on how to build habits for your clients, or your clients really came for flossing, that like you had a package flossing?
Absolutely. I had a package called Flossing. There's even a Wired magazine article about it. No joke. From like 2013 or 2014, I coached, I don't know if there's a way to go back and look, but literally 100 or 200 people on how to floss their teeth.
Okay.
I mean, I've coached some really silly, I started almost a decade ago. I want to say 11 or 12, somewhere in there, and coached, again, I was coming from just being someone who had learned to floss my own teeth, right? I went to the dentist enough times and he said, you need to learn to floss. And I was like, okay, I'm finally going to figure this out. So I dove into the research on how to learn to floss your own teeth. And by golly, I eventually got it to where I was flossing my teeth every single day. And I had a couple family members that really needed to floss their teeth every single day. And so I said, hey, I figured this out. How do you feel about trying out this platform and learning how to floss your teeth? So legitimately, people paid me, whatever. We've had prices go up since then, but people paid me a monthly amount to teach them how to floss, or to meditate for 5 minutes. And it's not that I was an expert at teaching someone to meditate. What I am good at is helping people find the 5 minutes consistently to take the action that they want to take. But absolutely, people are excited about being coached. Often in those little nagging things that we know we probably should do, but just aren't doing it. So there's certainly an element of humility in that. And the coaches, I've seen hundreds of coaches be successful, and I've also seen coaches get really frustrated. And so this project, Tony, if you get a chance to hear from Tony, he will tell you that I was very passionate about teaching this program, because in doing the certification program in Slack and in having one-off conversations and in coaching with tons and tons of clients or coaches, I could feel the frustration building. And I think there's very definitely a path that leads to success as a habit coach. I think it's absolutely doable. And we wanted to really walk through that together. And this is the first step. So great questions, great conversation. The fourth in our SCIC is curious. And who was it that hit on? Might have been Peter or Amos. I can't remember. Somebody hit on this one, and that is that feeling of attaching a judgment to a behavior or an action. And so curiosity is kind of the opposite of that. Curiosity keeps an open mind. And I'm going to try to learn as many names as I can. Those of you that are on here where I can see your names on the Zoom, it's awesome. I'm gonna do the best I can. Some folks I'd interacted with before and had a head start, but I'll work on that. So curiosity is asking questions. It's assuming very little, even asking those questions again that you might feel silly to ask that, but if you can find a tactful and respectful way to ask it or explain why you're asking it, I would say in most cases, ask the question. Now we want to be careful when we onboard. One of the things that can stall client momentum is a massive onboarding process. And we'll talk about that later. So you do want to have some thoughtfulness in that onboarding survey or how you get folks started. And so this doesn't mean bombard everybody at the beginning. It means kind of a steady drip of good questions. If we think about the toolkit of a coach, questions are, if anybody American remembers the Inspector Gadget tattoos or cartoons where he always had, all these funky little tools that he would pull out for every situation. I think for coaches, those funky little tools are our questions. And if we can think of better questions, we can guide clients in a way where they feel supported, they feel progress, but they don't feel judged, and they have their own insights and they build their own confidence. So stay curious. Again, you'll see a lot of this in the transcripts that we're going to go over here in just a minute. You'll see a lot, and it can be hard. It can be hard because people can communicate differently than we communicate, or some folks type in all caps, right? And do we interpret it as they're yelling at us? No, probably not. They're probably just not computer literate, in what all caps means. That's a kind of an obvious example. We have a lot of folks that speak a variety of different languages. And so it could be that there's a little bit lost in translation. And we'll talk about some strategies that you can use on that, but assume as little as you have to get to the next interaction with the client. Stay curious, look for patterns. Let's say, again, on the set priorities for your day, let's say I have a client that aces it Mondays and Tuesdays. They're fantastic at setting priorities for their day, but then they roll into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and, 2 or 3 weeks in a row, it just doesn't happen. Okay, well, that's probably a trend that we need to ask about. It might be that they get great sleep over the weekend, but then as they roll into the week, their kids' activities take over and they're only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep Monday and Tuesday night. And by the time they get to Wednesday, they're kind of a zombie. So maybe they want to talk about their priorities, but man, if we don't find a way to get them more sleep, they're not going to be able to focus on their priorities. So stay curious. Try to turn the shoulds off. If it's real to the client, it's real to us as a coach. We don't really get to play in, well, they should be doing this or they should be doing that. We want to identify what's really going on and help them find that first domino. They may think the first domino is here, but through our questions, we back it all up and we realize, nope, the first domino is really this one over here. I'll tell you, that's probably the second thing I've coached folks most on is getting to bed on time. That's probably a third of I don't know what's 1,400 or 1,500 clients at this point probably ends up at getting to bed on time, is the keystone habit for the overwhelming majority of them, even CEOs at this point, or executives. Getting to bed on time almost never fails as a tool that they need in their toolkit. And so the only way we learn that, because they certainly don't tell you that up front, the only way we learn that is constantly asking questions and kind of dialing back layer by layer, figuring out where the alignment is. So stay curious. So let me go back to our PowerPoint. And again, you'll see this everywhere. This SCIC, start small, consistent, iterate, and stay curious. We'll talk about these more as we dig into our transcripts. So I sent the transcripts. I'm also going to call them up here on the screen. We've got about 10 minutes left in the recorded portion. I'm happy to stay on and we can have conversations. I do want to keep it to an hour in case there are folks that really are fitting this in a tight schedule. So I want to make sure the hour works for them. So if you've already popped it open, you're going to see the transcripts, or we'll put them up here on the screen in a minute. Some things. Don't get too hung up on what should I say next. These are real transcripts. Obviously been not only anonymized, but anything that might identify someone has been removed. But these are real interactions with real clients, most of them many years ago. That you'll notice they are challenging. They're not clean and clinical. There's no clear trajectory, but they are representative of some typical client experiences, whether you call it a client avatar or a common pattern that you see in client conversations. You'll see, and we can talk about what those commonalities are. So there's a lot there. And I guess if you feel like overwhelmed or stuck, or I'm not sure where to go next with this, that's okay. The point of this exercise is not necessarily for you to be able to match my writing style and come up with the exact next response to the client. The point is to be thinking about each of those principles and seeing the threads of where you're seeing those principles emerge. And frankly, where the coach might have not have been able to do better in some scenarios, or what the client can, or what the coach can do next to guide the client back on the path of making progress, or letting the client at their own pace. So pacing will be important. We'll talk about that more, but clients set the pace. Coaches don't set the pace. So one client may learn a skill in a week. Some clients may take 3 weeks, or some clients may take 3 months. And as long as the client is happy and supported, and you enjoy, coaching that habit as a coach, there is no definition. There's no essential definition of success. It can all be at the client's pace. As long as they're feeling like it's meaningful, then it was successful. So a little bit of housekeeping type things before we jump in to some of the transcripts. If you have notes or draft messages for the exercises, and you would like individual feedback on those, email those to us by Wednesday. You can do it sooner if you'd like, certainly, and use the coaching@coach.me email address. It's in the PDF that has the exercises as well. That helps us work as a team if we need to. We've got office hours on Thursdays, 11 a.m. Central Time and 6 p.m. Central Time. So the 2 hours earlier than when we started, and then an evening one. I'm hoping the evening one works for folks in the Asian corridor to be early in the morning for them. But I hope I was trying to catch as many different time zones as we could. So those open office hours, we'll talk more about the transcripts and the exercises. And we can ask questions, dig into that, but that'll be much more. We've been back and forth today, but it'll be even more back and forth. Recordings will be available for everything. So if you have to miss, you can always catch the recording. And Q&A is available, again, emailing coaching@coach.me, or if it's something that you're willing to share with the group, I would encourage you to ask the question in the plan so that everyone can see the dialogue. I think those are helpful. All right. So any questions or thoughts? We'll jump into transcripts here in a minute. All right. Let me get flipped over to that. All right. So this is the PDF you received, and if anybody had any challenges with that, email me and I'll get it to you. So these are, again, these are real transcripts. Nothing was changed that would impact, the way that you would read them. We want to focus on the SCIC of the principles: starting small, consistency, iteration, and curiosity. Some things to think about as you read through these: the onboarding surveys. So I do use an onboarding survey. I believe it's in my exact one is in the Coach.me resource center, or email me and I'll send it to you if you're curious. You'll see clients that share a massive amount of extra background. That's common. Folks can sometimes be at either extreme. They either give you a ton of information or very little information. It can sometimes be a little bit of both. You'll see a few places where I've used exercises to help the client organize their thinking. I didn't share, sometimes they will say, I attached a file here. I didn't attach those in the transcripts. And you really don't need them. Often, a lot of cases, it's not about us digging into the weeds with the client. It's about using the exercise to get the client thinking about something. And then what we call these potential blisters. So be thinking about where something might be kind of rubbing, the wrong way, that could lead to, the client not feeling supported. So after each exchange, think about how you might summarize the client journey, which principles might be relevant to that exchange, and then if it's possible, draft the next reply message to the client. These will be the focus of our Q&A calls, and again, use the coaching at Coach.me for the actual exercises themselves. All right, so I think I'm going to take a few questions and then pause the recording, and then we can stay on and chat if anybody would like to further. But any questions or thoughts bubbling up to you guys? All right. All quiet. Well, hopefully that's because we've given you some good stuff to think about. So dig into the exercises. Again, don't worry about the right answer. That's not the focus at this stage. This is really a part of an 8-week process. So it's kind of like putting cookies in the oven. They'll be ready in 8 weeks. If you check on them in 1/8 of the time through, they're not going to be very tasty cookies. So hang in there on this process. It may feel uncomfortable. It may feel like it doesn't make sense. It may feel a little bit awkward. It may feel kind of silly. All those range of emotions are very natural. And I would say the longer you've been coaching, the more intense that feeling might be. But I would encourage you to hang in there, go through the exercises with us, go through the Q&A with us. And I really think certainly by week 4 or 5, it will kind of click on how you blend that wonderful experience that you have with some of these foundational principles of habit coaching, and see how to move forward. But you're probably going to have to tolerate a week or two of kind of feeling like this doesn't make sense, or it's too basic. That's a natural feeling, and I would really encourage you to hang in there, go through the processes with us, give it a stab, and keep rolling. And I commit to you, I think you'll be happy with the learning that comes on in a bit. All right, let me stop the recording.